So everyone, with the introduction of the X-T5 and the X-H2, Fuji's high megapixel APS-C sensors, we've got the ability to do pixel shift. Now, pixel shift technology has been in the GFX cameras for a while. I've used it on and off, so I kind of know a little bit about it. I've been testing it out on these cameras, and I gotta say that it's kind of cool sometimes, but mostly it's not. This video is gonna be about what it is, how you do it, and then what are like the biggest problems with it and some of the cool things about it too. So let's go ahead and talk real quickly about what it is. Basically, it's taking the 40 megapixels in the X-T5 and the X-H2, and it's using the image stabilization, the in-body stabilization, to move the sensor around a little bit. And what happens is then you take a series of 20 raw files, and those 20 raw files, then you have to use the Fuji Pixel Shift Combiner to squish them together to create one really high resolution 160 megapixel photograph. That's a DNG file that you can go in Photoshop or Capture One or wherever you want and be able to process them. The promise is that it's going to give us unparalleled high resolution. The actual use of it is a little bit different. So what we need to do in order to use it is just take your X-T5 or your X-H2, go to the drive mode, go down to pixel shift, and then that's about it. Basically, the camera tells you use a tripod, and you could choose the interval. So it's going to take 20 images. You can do it the shortest amount of time, which is just real fast. Or if you're using a flash, you might want to use one of the other settings to let your flash recharge. There are some limitations that Fuji has on their website. So for instance, you can't use continuous focus. You don't want to use anything. You can't use anything above 16 high ISO. And there's a couple other limitations, but honestly, their documentation kind of stinks. And it doesn't really tell us too much. Every time, almost about 90% of the time that I've done this, in fact, I get an error. And half the time, I have no idea why that error is there or where it's from or what's happening. It's just kind of problematic. So basically, once pixel shift is selected, your camera is ready to go. It's just waiting for you to press the trigger to take the pictures. It already chooses electronic shutter, put it on a tripod, and then you just take pictures. So here I've got a leaf, and we're going to take a series of 20 images right now. And you can see them going. Once those are done, you need to come over to the computer, put it on the computer, and then you have to use a program called Pixel Shift Combiner from Fuji. Once you're in Pixel Shift Combiner, all you gotta do is click Register Jobs, point to the folder, select all of the files that you did from your session, and then you could tell Fuji to start combining the files. Now, in this series of images, every file has a error, as you can see right here. And I'm not exactly sure exactly why, but what I'm thinking is that there was a tiniest, slightest movement in the in each image maybe, and the pixels are not exactly lining up. I have found the ability to ignore this most of the time and just look at the images by themselves, even with that detected error, and they kind of look okay, or they don't, which we'll get to in a little bit. After conversion, these are DNG files, so you can open them up in your favorite software. Right here is just Adobe Camera Raw. And you can see that we have all the settings that we'd normally have. We can warm this leaf up a little bit. Let's see. Let's bring. I already brought up the whites, maybe the shadows, and a little bit of contrast. And then we're just gonna click OK. We're gonna click Open. You can batch process these if you want to, just like normal. Once it's open, you should be able to get a handle on what this is about. So if we go to image size, you can see that this file is now. Let's go to pixels. 15,456 by 10,304. Lots of resolution there. And then we can start to look at the image. We can get close. This was done with the 80mm macro. And you can already see how this kind of resolution helps us a little bit. So if we're out zoomed all the way back to fit it on the screen, we have this tiny little thing right there, this little bit of leaf stuff. And if we zoom in and go all the way down to 100%, you can see that right there. It's a little bit in the area blur, but that's the kind of stuff that we're looking at. If we go and we look at the image, if we go and look at the image itself, you can see that I'm using macro, so there's not a ton of focuses at f8, but you can see there's a lot of detail that would otherwise not be there if we were zoomed in to 100% like that. If we take this image and compare it to the original, a single raw file, and we go all the way down to that level, this is at 100% right here. Well, this is, let's not zoom all windows, is 100% right there. So you can see a pretty drastic difference in how far down you can go. If we go down to that level, things get pretty blurry on the original 40 megapixel file. The 160 megapixels has quite a bit more resolution. So basically that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the ability for static images to get a lot of resolution. So what about taking the X-T5 or the X-H2 out into a landscape situation or somewhere outside, a more real world situation? How does it perform there? So this first shot is just a setup on a pretty sturdy tripod in the parking lot, and the wind was not too terrible. And it's 100. This is the combined file. If we zoom all the way in, I'm pretty disappointed. So it just doesn't look that great. You can see all the pigeons on the top, but the resolution just doesn't seem to be there. And the more we zoom in, we could see that these pigeons were moving, and so they're all jacked up. You can see like some digital artifacts even around the windows. I'm assuming that's from the camera moving and the pixel shift combiner just not knowing what to do. If you look at all these lines, they're not straight and they're not sharp. If we go to the another one, I did a little bit closer. I tried to do another series and I'm getting the same results. It just doesn't look that good. So of course I am at 200% on a 160 megapixel file. So if I was going to print this, it would look fine, probably. However, the point of this is supposed to be the highest resolution, the highest quality you could possibly get. And it just doesn't look very practical out in any kind of real world situation outside of the studio. A third attempt. And this one is maybe a touch better. Like you can see the lines look better. But it's still a little bit fuzzy and some weird stuff everywhere. Like you can see stuff like this. You know, this is something where a single GFX file is going to be way better if you wanted to print really large. And you're just going to have to go through and do too much weird processing. You can see those kind of artifacts in different parts of the images. Here I pointed my camera at the Omaha skyline, and I wanted to kind of look and see what the flags look like, because the flags were moving and they look pretty bad. Digital artifacting, and we are at 200%, but all these lines, nothing's crazy sharp. It looks just bad. And I'm assuming that's because the camera moved a slight touch. And again, it was on a tripod. I used a remote trigger, and it's just not giving me very good results. This is the final example, so I was like, oh, this one's kind of cool. Not much is moving in this at all, so hopefully this is going to turn out a little bit better, and it did. This is just right into the entrance of the studio. If we zoom in, this is kind of cool. The quality is pretty good on this. You can see the bricks. The light was going on. The light was going from there all the way down, and so it looks a little weird, but kind of cool. It doesn't look too bad. Not quite as sharp as something that you're going to get out of the GFX, but for something like this actually looks pretty good. But again, it's pretty rare to get a high quality shot on all my tests outdoors with anything that has any movement whatsoever. Even if your camera slightly moves or something is moving in the scene, you're going to get some problems. Look, at the beginning of the video, I showed you the example of a leaf, and it's kind of cool. You can get in closer. The quality looks pretty good on something that's completely not moving in studio. So if you're in the studio and you're shooting stuff that's not moving, pixel shift's kind of cool. It's all right. We can get away with a lot more resolution. We're doing some tests. Me and Kurt Johnson, my buddy, are doing some awesome stuff with the GFX 100, shooting insanely high resolution stuff. The idea is that we have a purpose for it, though. Like, we want to shoot these different textures and things and be able to blow them up so they're wall sized and be able to market those kind of deals. So unless you have a reason to do it, that you're going to have access to a studio or a controlled situation where things are not moving, then the pixel shift might be something that's kind of cool. But honestly, I don't see much of a use for this. I really don't enjoy the way I'm always getting an error, and it seems like sometimes randomly some weird artifacts here and there. That just doesn't make much sense to me. And so Fuji seems way behind, because the other manufacturers like Olympus, like I said, has some fixes for that. And this is just not very practical and not very useful. So it might sound cool as a marketing thing on the box, or you heard, hey, pixel shift, I can get 160 megapixel images. It's just not very practical. But if you're a studio photographer in a controlled situation, it's maybe worth just a little bit of a look and to see if it fits what you're doing. So if you enjoy this, make sure to subscribe. Email me if you have any questions, or throw a comment below. I love when I see stuff like that. I love responding. So take care of yourselves, and we'll see you later.